Hello, my name is Mary Louise Sanchez, and I'm the moderator today. I'd like to welcome you to the first ever Kidlit Latinx Book Festival. Before I introduce everybody, I'd like you to remember to read our anti-harassment policy that's in the chat box. And now I would like to introduce our panelists, and I will have them introduce themselves, and they're going to show you their book, and also just tell you just a short um, introduction to their book, especially like the genre and so forth. So first, we'll have Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex Astor. I'm the author of Emblem Island Curse of the Night Witch, which is the first book in the Emblem Island series, and it is upper middle grade fantasy.
Thank you, Alex. And we'll have Ernesto.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ernesto Cisneros, and I'm the author of Ephraim Divided. It's a middle grade contemporary book about a 12-year-old boy whose life is turned upside down when his mom is deported, leaving him to fend for himself and for his siblings, in hopes that Ama will soon return.
Thank you. Alejandra.
Hi, my name is Alejandra Green. I'm the co-creator of Fantastic Tales of Nothing. It's a middle grade fantasy graphic novel, actually.
And last but not least, Fanny.
Hello, everyone. I'm Fanny Rodriguez. I'm the co-creator of Fantastic Tales of Nothing. It's a graphic novel, a middle grade graphic novel about a fantasy world called Nothing and the adventures of an unwilling hero named Nathan.
Thank you all. Just for our audience, these are all debut authors. They've all come out, or they will be coming out. So keep them on your radar, please. Well, I have some questions to ask our panelists. And the first question is, collectively, we call ourselves Latinx or Latino or Latina. How do you personally identify yourself under this umbrella? And I'm going to start. And I'd like to show you my book. My book is called The Wind Called My Name, and it's a middle grade historical fiction novel. And my book came out in 2018. My book is loosely based on my mom's life, and on both sides of my family, we're New Mexican. My family came over in 1598 to what is now New Mexico. And in those days, 1598, it was Nueva España. But I identify myself as New Mexican. And even in my book, I make a big point of that because, there's a generalization that everybody who speaks Spanish or eats tortillas or whatever, they're right from Mexico. Well, that's not the case. So I wanted to dispel that generalization, and so I call myself New Mexican. So what do you call yourself, Fanny? What is your identity?
Well, I'm Mexican.
Okay.
I'm from the northeast of Mexico in a state called Nuevo León. But most of my family comes from another state called Coahuila. My ancestry is very strange because part of it, probably we are mestizos. There's a lot of immigrants of different parts of Europe, but most of my family are Mexican, and from my mother's side, I think they are native. They are Native Americans, but they're also in Mexico. It's called the Kikapus, uh, but it's very long ago. So I'm Mexican. I'm Regia, is how you call the Mexicans from my state. But yeah, it's basically that.
Well, that's an interesting background. What about your background, Alejandra? How do you identify?
I'm also Mexican. I was born and raised in Mexico, more specifically in Baja California Sur. I'm from San Jose del Cabo, part of Los Cabos. Maybe you know that place, touristic place. My family is basically from there, so we're pretty local. And well, yeah, when I grew up and I had to study to Monterrey. That's why we live like 10 minutes. I live 10 minutes away from Fanny. That's how we meet each other.
Oh,
So yeah,
oh, neighbors there. Okay,
yeah.
Ernesto, what about your background, your identity? How do you identify yourself?
Well, it's kind of a tricky question. I mean, I do use the term Latinx. It's mostly the term that I do use, and I like the whole metaphor of the Latinx umbrella, because as of late we've been kind of under attack. It's been a very rainy season since 2016, and we're having to weather the storm together. So I like the whole Latinx umbrella because it's kind of like it doesn't really matter where we come from, being from we're pretty much all. I like to use the term Americanos, because whether you're from North America, Central America, or Southern America, it's all America. America is not really a country; it's a continent.
That's true.
So, but I do love the whole idea of the umbrella, just because we're all here to try and better the lives of our family members and for ourselves. And I like the idea of even though it's pouring down on us right now, we hold the umbrella up together. But yes, I do use the term Latinx, and I also use just Mexican American. My parents are from Mexico. That's where they're from.
Oh, I love that about the storm. I never thought about that. That's a great one. And Alex, how do you identify yourself?
So I'm Colombian. My family came from Colombia. My mother moved here when she was about my age. And I lived with my grandparents growing up, so I spoke Spanish before English. So I'm Colombian. I really embrace that part of my culture, and I'm sure we'll get into it later, but the Colombian mythology and heritage really inspired my debut.
Well, thank you. And we are, of course, all of us under the Latinx umbrella. And yes, and it was storming too, Ernesto. All right, the next question is, it's what's your main character's ordinary world under the Latinx umbrella? And I know that's kind of a hard one, but for instance, like my book, The Wind Called My Name, the main character is Margarita Sandoval. And so her ordinary world is that they took the New Mexico culture with them to Wyoming during the Great Depression. So there are santos on the wall, and it's also, the santos are not just on the wall, but it's in their hearts. It's ingrained in their hearts. The foods, of course, are New Mexican. There's chile colorado. There's chili ristras hanging on the houses. Piñón, the nuts. Quelites, wild spinach. And all of these foods kind of cause a little turmoil with my character and her so-called friend. Oh, and also there's other bizcochitos, since it's the Christmas season. They're making bizcochitos and pozole and of course tortillas, and they even have a matanza in this. So that's her ordinary world, even though she's in Wyoming. So this time I'm going to start with Ernesto. What's the ordinary world for Efren?
My main character, his name is Efren Nava, and I really do connect with him in this aspect. Efren was the first U.S. born member of his family, like myself, and so being the first one that is U.S. born, his parents are undocumented and he's not. And so for myself, I always felt a little bit privileged, and I always felt a sense of guilt, because why am I being afforded this gift and this opportunity when the rest of my family wasn't? And I would see cousins and I would see family members, and they were in Mexico, and I'd see just the struggles that they were having. And here I was, and I was just wondering, why was I given this and nobody else? So I think that's kind of the way that Efren is seeing himself, and he's being kind of, like the title indicates, he's divided a little bit. Sometimes, I guess the question becomes, how do you love a country? How do you love your country when your country doesn't seem to love you back? And that seems to be where my character is right now. So, yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Um, Alejandra, what is your main character's ordinary world under the Latinx umbrella?
We actually are going to answer together since Fanny is also the
Okay.
co-creator. So if
Okay.
that's
Yes,
Yeah.
that's fine.
well, broadly, since it's a graphic novel, there's a lot of like illustrations, and there's a lot of like many references or details about our book regarding our experience here, our life experiences, from like the buildings, the colors, also the food, like Mary Louise was saying. It's part of that, like a little tidbits of culture within the book, the world building.
Basically, the Fantastic World Called Nothing has a little bit of everything that we love about fantasy stories, our childhood, cartoons that we love. But there's also a lot of our culture, even without us noticing. And then noticing, for example, there are markets and mercados. There's food. Uh, all the characters we can consider them within the Latinx spectrum, like everybody is Latino. Even Bardu being blonde, because there's a lot of blondes in in the north of Mexico. Uh, there's also, for example, we have a character named Sina that is she can transform into a crow that is related to a legend. Well, it's not a legend, more like an urban legend from my state, that there are witches, brujas, that transform in large birds. And the main fantasy creatures in our world, they are based on nahuales that are, well, people that can transform into animals. So yeah, there's a little bit of everything in all the world building of our novel.
Well, thank you for that. Now, Alex, there are some birds in your story too. I'm reading that. And what other what's your ordinary world for your character? Because I did see the birds in there, but what are some ordinary world that's under the Latinx umbrella in your story or for your character?
Right. So, one of the main amazing things that inspired Emblem Island are these cuentos that my grandmother told me from Colombia. And that is also the ordinary world for Tor Luna, the main character. So, in his world, there's a book called the Book of Cuentos, and that's kind of the guidebook to their society. It shows their fears, their mythology, what they think about, what they are afraid of at night. And we actually put those stories in between the chapters of the book so the reader can kind of read along and kind of get that bit of culture, where I feel like anyone who's from a Latinx like background knows that the stories are really dark and they're more like cautionary tales. Any story, we all have our different stories, and they kind of get changed over time because they're mostly from like an oral tradition, and our countries are so close together in some cases that some stories get evolve into different stories or some get blended together. So it's a really cool like history of mythology that this character also grows up with. So I would say an ordinary day, like in the first chapter, he and his best friend go to sneak the like full copy of the stories, because there's always those like scary stories that you're like, you tell your abuela like, tell that one, and she's like, I don't know if you're old enough. So that, even though this is like a fantasy, so it's not contemporary, it's not like a daily life in someone who is from a Latinx community, I wanted to put that part of my upbringing in the book. So everyone in the society, their daily life kind of revolves around this mythology that they've made part of their culture.
Yes, cuentos really did play a big part in your story. That's what I'm noticing.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's I think that's pretty common for all of Latinx people, me included. Yes. I forgot to tell the name of our session, and it's Celebrating Latinx Heroes, and I like to say heroes, capital HEROE, little OES, heroes and heroes. I used to be a teacher librarian, and every year I would sponsor a night of the notables with kids who were interested. And I always emphasize to them and the other educators that worked with me, we would emphasize to the kids that they needed to pick a hero or a hero who was actually, a good person. And it could be an ordinary person, but they had to be a good person. And of course, they always picked, famous people to study, and that was probably better. Although we know that heroes and heroes can just be ordinary people too. So I'm asking you, who are your personal heroes and heroes or heroes, and why are they your, why are they important to you? So I'd like to start with, I'm going to start with Ernesto on this one again.
Well, in Ephraim Divided, it's kind of funny because in one of the scenes, Ephraim's kind of he's watching his mom making some sopes. And you know how when you warm them up, you have to pinch the edges so that the beans don't seep out off the sope. But they're super hot and they're steaming. And he's watching his mom and she's pinching the edges. And to him, it seems like she has superpowers. And so he actually jokes about it to himself, like she's kind of like Superwoman. But because she's making sopes, she becomes a soped woman to him. And that was kind of like to play an homage to my own parents, because when I think about heroes, and if you ask kids who's the best superhero ever, a lot of people will always go with Batman because he doesn't have any superpowers. And that's kind of the way I've always seen my parents, because just the idea that, when I was in my late teens, I was just, hanging out with my friends, and I wasn't, the idea that my parents left the country for to change the the future of everybody, the next generation, is just like, it blows me away. And so just thinking about the journeys that they took, I think heroes, they always take big risks. They're very selfless. They put themselves in harm's way to help other people. That's exactly what my parents did by immigrating to the United States. They had no money. They didn't know anybody here. That's about as heroic a story as I can see. So those would be my heroes.
Well, thank you, Ernesto. You had some good role models for Efren in the story too. I don't know if Alejandra and Fanny, if you want to answer this separate. Well, I think you could each answer this separately, because it's about your personal heroes or heroes. So how about Alejandra? Why don't you answer first?
My personal hero. I think, yeah, same as Ernesto, my mom, especially. She's the strongest woman I know, while remaining being the kindest as well. And I don't know, it's a really big role model for me. And she's always been there for me, even though she didn't know exactly what I was doing when I was a teen or right now. She always had my back, and I really appreciate it. And I really admire her for that. Yeah, she's my biggest hero.
Yay, Mom.
Yay, Mom.
How about Fanny? Who are your personal heroes or heroes?
Funny enough, it's also my mom. My mother raised 5 daughters by herself. Well, my dad was away a lot to work and raise us, maintain us, right? When I was little, I never understood my mom. She was very strict because, well, how you handle 5 daughters? I'm the eldest, so as long as I was growing up, we grew apart more and more because she didn't also understand what I was doing, what I wanted to do. And even right now, she's a little bit confused about what I do, but she doesn't tell it, but she's very happy about it. And I admire it a lot because of that, because she raised us and we are very different people and very independent and strong women, each one of us. And she's a great example of what kind of woman I want to be. She's independent. She wants to do things her own way. And and she supports us, and I don't know, she is my hero, mi heroína, I guess, because she doesn't notice, but she inspires me so much. Uh, and she won't understand it because she doesn't speak English.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it's also my mom.
And Alex.
It's kind of funny because right now we just had Thanksgiving. We're celebrating, so I'm here with my family, and we were talking about my ancestors, especially my great grandma, who I knew for the first 10 years of my life, before she passed. And I was just thinking about the fact that she was in an arranged marriage, which was a common thing, I guess, at the time. So she got married when she was 15, and she had 5 kids, and her husband got killed in a work accident. And so she was in her early 20s, around my age, with 5 kids and no husband, living in a world where being a woman was not the same thing as it is now. So I think she's my hero, because thinking about that, like right now, I can't imagine what she went through, and everything she went through got me to where I am today, because I wouldn't have had the opportunities. And so just having the opportunity to even like share stories from my culture from people who came so far before me and whose lives were so much harder than my life is right now. It's really inspiring. And so she's definitely my hero. And I can't, when I knew her, I didn't know any of this, and I wish I could have asked her about her struggles. But I think probably all of us come from a lineage of really strong heroes and heroes who have their sacrifices have gotten us where we are now. So I think our common theme of our family members being our heroes might be unique to like our experience of our culture and how we like value our families so much, and their sacrifices helped us, and like maybe we come from like family centric cultures. But that's my answer as well.
Yeah. Well, and that would be my answer too. It's family for me too. Particularly, I guess, my mother and my father, because I'm the oldest of 5, but my mother was 17 when she had me, and my dad was 18. And you think now, you think, oh my gosh, that marriage should have failed, but no, it lasted, until my mom died. So it was over 50 years. But I just think as teens, they had the foresight and the sense of responsibility to raise, me and my 4 siblings, and to model for us. I mean, my mother did graduate from high school, yes, but she modeled more, get more. And then I had an uncle. This was during the Great Depression, and he was working on the CC camps then. And he would send money to my grandparents, and instead of my grandparents spending that money, they saved it and they gave it to him, and he went to college during the Great Depression. I was like, oh my gosh. And I think my mom always held that carrot in front of us. This is your uncle that did this. And then on my dad's side, the same thing. I had an uncle, these are, of course, he went to the University of New Mexico. So that was, he wasn't a fish out of water. But my other uncle went to the University of Wyoming. That he was really a fish out of water there as a Hispanic. So those are always my role models, my parents. And then in my book, the saints play a big part in my story. Like San Isidro is a saint for farmers. Those are ordinary people. So it plays a part in my story too. Okay, our next question. Who are your books or authors that are role or heroes or heroes for you, and why is that? And I'm going to start that one. I think my book, Heroes and Heroes, well, first of all, it's the authors. If they touch my soul and my heart, then I'm in. Those are my heroes and heroes. And I know that in 8th grade, Scarlett O'Hara was a hero for me. And I don't think it's because, and I know now it's you know, that book is kind of put down because of slavery and everything, but it wasn't because of that reason that she was my hero. I think it was because of how strong-willed she was, and how important it was for her to help her family, you know, with their land. But anyway, that book was a particular favorite of mine. And then on recent ones, of course, your books, they touched my heart too. But also, there's a new book called Brother's Keeper by Julie Lee, where about two children who are escaping from North Korea. That was very powerful. And I read that. I wanted to read that book because my father-in-law was a prisoner of war in North Korea um, during the Korean War. So that was a really good book, and it really touched me. Finding Langston by Lisa Klein Robinson. That's the story of the migration of the, you know, African Americans from the South up north. That was a very powerful book. Coyote Sunrise by Dan Gemmenhart. That was a powerful one for me too. So anything that anything that touches my heart and my soul, I love those kinds of books. What about books that you find heroic, Alejandra?
Um, well, it's funny because I do read books, but I don't read that many books. I've always been more inspired by
Okay.
animated movies and movies in general. I studied animation, um, but many animations are based off books, obviously. And one of the series I really loved that later I realized it was a manga, a comic book, was Hiromu Arakawa's Full Metal Alchemist, and I really, I really, her way to come up with stories and all the complicated things she does with her stories and characters, especially. Um, I really, really like how she does that. And actually, when I first knew about her work, I thought, well, back in that time, they would usually change the name of the author so it sounded more masculine. So I
Yeah.
thought it was a guy, with the author. And later then I realized that her real name is Hiromi Arakawa and she was a woman. And that really, really inspired me even more. Um, and I also admire her as an author because she's been able to have this successful like franchise, and there's not even one photograph of her. So that's great.
Oh, wow.
I, I I'm really bad with like press and stuff. I get very nervous. So the fact that she can do that, that's really awesome for me, and that would be cool. But here we are. I don't mind, but that's really admire. I admire her a lot for that. So yeah, that's one of my important, like more important heroes.
Okay. How about you, Fanny? You can be an illustrator too.
Well, my career is very strange because I studied graphic design, but I was a programmer and I work in video games, in art, I've been a florist too, so yeah. Uh, my inspiration comes from everywhere, and my book heroes vary a lot. I also discovered my love for books more in my late teens. So when I was little, I read more comic, especially manga, because in Mexico it was in the local TV, they pass a lot of Japanese animation. So I started drawing and creating stories due to that. There was a creator called Naoko Takeuchi that she made Sailor Moon. It was my first time seeing a superhero that
Oh,
was a woman and was a student like me. So even if today is not my favorite manga work. She inspired a lot in me, but in literature, I discovered the Bronte sisters,
Mm.
uh, especially Charlotte and Emily Bronte with Wuthering Heights, and Jane Eyre probably is one of my favorite characters in books, even if she is written by a woman in the early 800s.
Okay.
It resonates a lot how many women even back then had the same struggles right now, like that you don't trust yourself or any of that stuff. So yeah, I can say Naoko Takeuchi, the Bronte sisters, Diane Wynne Jones with Holes and the Moving Castle. Um, as there's a lot. I
Yeah.
don't know the names of everyone. Also, video games. The writers of video games are my heroes because they create such amazing stories.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm not going to be able to give Ernesto and Alex as much time as the rest of us got, but Alex, very quickly, can you tell us who your book heroes are or characters?
Sure. So, kind of similarly to Fanny, I love Jane Austen not only for her works, but because just writing back then as a woman was so difficult. And she just learning about her history in college, the fact that she really didn't make any money during her lifetime, and the fact that now she has some of the biggest franchises and books in history that I think is really sad. And I think authors like her and then other Latinx authors afterwards kind of gave us the platform and like the space and ability to have these careers. So I feel really bad for her because it's really unfair that she didn't really make a lot of money. She had to sign a really bad deal, like a publishing deal, because no one wanted to publish a woman back then. And so I think that she's my hero because the fact that she knew she couldn't be successful, but she did it anyway, and she just did it because she loved it. That's kind of what a hero does. They're just paving the way for future people, even though they know they personally aren't going to benefit from it. So she's my hero.
Great ones. Literary heroes there. And Ernesto, this is going to be our last question, so you get to tell us who your book heroes or characters are.
Well, I'm actually gonna. My list is really long, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of put everybody into a little group. I want to say it's the Latinx community because I wanted to be a screenwriter a long time ago when I was younger, and I left the industry because it was just too competitive and people just weren't very nice to each other. And the reason why the Latinx community is so amazing to me is because we never compete with each other. Everybody paves the road, and you open the door, and I mean, it's just like what's going on with the country. A lot of people, they come to the U.S. to become successful, and the second that they become successful and they acquire a bit of the American dream, they want to shut the door behind them, and they don't want anybody else to come on to follow. And the Latino community has been the opposite. The originators, Sandra Cisneros, Gary Soto, Meg Medina, Pam Munoz, Mete La Peña, Guadalupe Garcia Macaw, Carlton Trujillo, Angela Cervantes. I mean, I can go through all the lists, and every single one of them has paved the road, and they open the door, and they just keep making the door wider. They're opening the whole garage and letting everybody else in, and they're making it possible for everybody. And not once do they think about, how do they make their names bigger? They don't. They just think about how am I going to help the rest of the community, and that's why they're amazing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I remember Gary Soto. He made those books, and I bought them for my school and promoted them and bought tons of them so that the kids would have them for their book, in their classrooms. Yes. Guadalupe McCall too. She's a special friend. All right. So we now have some questions from students. Okay. So Ernesto, would you read us the first question?
Yes, it looks like our first question is from Daniela Yu. She's an 8th grader from South Carolina, and here's her question.
And my last question is for Alex Astor. My question is, how long did it take you to write your book?
Thank you so much for your question, Daniela. This is actually unusual for me because this was the sixth book I had ever written. I think a lot of authors have manuscripts that never got published. This only took me 3 weeks to write, which is very unusual because all of my other books took me months or years. But this was the first time writing from my culture and writing inspired by the cuentos from my childhood, where I felt like the words were just pouring out of me. It felt like this was my story to tell. And so I think that's a good sign whenever something is just so easy because you want it to just come out and you want the story to be heard. I basically did not sleep for 3 weeks and I got it out there. Of course, writing a book takes many iterations. It ended up doubling in size. So that's not to say I just wrote this and then it got printed. Of course not. It took about 1.5 years more of edits, but the first version was 3 weeks. So I think if you love something and you have a story to tell, don't let the time constraints limit you. Just write it out and then edit it later. But the most important thing is to get that on the page. So we have a question for Ernesto from Cheyenne L, who is in 7th grade in South Carolina. And their question is, what are you careful about when writing a book?
Well, that is an excellent question. One of the things I'm most worried about when I write books, and I have to be really cautious, is making sure the characters are just right, they're authentic. I want to make sure the reader feels safe. And I want to make sure the representation is just right, because as Latinos, we're such a large part of the population, but yet we have such little representation. So people don't get to see a Latino family very often. And so while there are some people who are not the greatest people and they happen to be Latino, there's so few of them, I don't want to highlight those people. And there's so many great people in the Latino X community, and those are the people who I want to give all the spotlight to. So that's one of the biggest things I'm careful about. And that's, representation and making sure that we highlight the majority and not the minority of people.
Okay. And our third question, this is for anybody, I guess, but maybe, well, I think we'll have Fanny and Alejandra answer this one.
My name is Ellie, and my question is, what inspired you to start making books?
Well, what did inspire you to make a book?
Honestly, we never planned to make a book.
Oh.
Ale and I are, as you can see, we live closely by. We are best friends. We met each other at work, working for video games. But we wanted to create something together. So we said, oh, let's create a webcomic. We both draw, we both create stories, so let's do it. And from that, we create a webcomic that was Fantastic Tales of Nothing in 2017. And somebody find it, our agent, and tell, hey, do you want to publish it? And they publish it. So yeah, neither of us, we both like comics very much, but we didn't expect to make a book. We just go with the flow. What we wanted to create something for us. Together. I don't know, Ale.
Yeah, we wanted to do something together, and since we first thought about a short film, but since it's a lot of work, and we had like a how do you say, like a goal to do something before the year ended, and we said, okay, let's draw a webcomic, why not? And yeah, it was pretty much a story for that we would both like and to share for others.
In my book, I think what inspired me, first of all, I was a teacher librarian, and I went to a genealogy conference, and this guy that's a genealogist, he wrote this story, and I thought, oh my gosh, he doesn't even know children's literature. I can write a book. But I wrote I thought I was writing a picture book for my mom's birthday about her life growing up. And then I found, oh my gosh, this is harder than I thought. I guess I really don't know children's literature that well. So I had to study and study and study and study And I think it took me 20 years to write my book, and I would take it to conferences, and finally somebody said, "This is not a picture book. This is a novel." And okay, I guess I'll try a novel. And I persisted, and that's how it happened for me. So I think all of us have answered a question. Is that right? No, Alex, did you did answer a question, right? Yes. I've had a wonderful time meeting you, and I know you from your books also. And I want to thank our audience for coming and joining in on this first ever Latinx Kidlit Festival. And I hope to see more of you in the future and to see your works. Thank you all for coming.